What's going on, College Hoops Heads? This is another edition on the Center Hubs YouTube channel. My name is Stephen Bagell. I am here with Conrad Pascual. And Conrad and I were just talking. We definitely need a name for these segments. We just have not thought of one yet collectively, but don't you worry. We'll put our heads together and come up with something. Today we are going to be talking about St. John's. I wouldn't say specifically Bryce Hopkins committing there, but also they have the Arizona State kid, Joson Sanon. They are getting visits this weekend from both Xaivian and Ian Jackson. They have potential to be really good. Like, if they land both those guys, they have a dynamite starting five, to say the least. So, Conrad, first of all, let's talk about what did happen with Bryce Hopkins and Sanon from Arizona State. So far, and then we know Zuby Ejiofor is coming back for his senior year. So, overall, what do we expect from St. John's before even a potential commitment from Ian Jackson or Xaivian or anybody else in the portal?
I would have to think that Rick Pitino sees this as an opportunity to really infuse a little bit more offensive versatility, to St. John's offensive sets. Make no mistake. They were obviously fantastic this past season. They all bought in. They had a definitive identity where, yeah, they may have played at a relatively slower pace, but, they allowed themselves to be consistent defensively. They were opportunistic scoring. And, they really just tried to attack the paint. Having said that, I think that was really largely due to the limitations of their personnel. I think with both of them, Bryce Hopkins and Joson Sanon, but specifically Sanon. Maybe I'm a little biased having watched a lot of Arizona State tape, but Rick Pitino, they really want to be able to be more efficient in the half court, not just trying to muscle it inside, but trying to actually find ways to shift the defense and kind of break a zone. That's exactly what Joson Sanon does, right? That's why I was really high on him. Even if he wasn't going to declare for this year's draft class, really piqued my interest. I would like to think that there would just be a lot less offensive lulls.
Yeah, I covered St. John's quite a bit this year just because my ties to Villanova and the Big East and being in the Philadelphia area. So, St. John's, I was at the game where St. John's lost to Villanova at Villanova. And a huge reason for that is, one, St. John's for the year, I think, shot 29% from three. They were one of the worst. And, it's crazy that, they were 2 seed on one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. But they relied so heavily not only on what you said, but also, forcing turnovers and making the defense turn into offense. Now, if they're able to add, even with Sanon and Bryce Hopkins, those are two okay shooters. Better than, I think. I know they're losing RJ Lewis and Aaron Scott, so maybe that's just a wash. But then if all of a sudden you add Ian Jackson, who's a 40% three-point shooter, or Xaivian Lee, who could, hit a step-back jumper for you from three, then all of a sudden, this offense is potent. They're going to defend. It all of a sudden becomes a very intriguing team, to say the least.
Yeah, I just, again, even right now, just with Bryce Hopkins and Joson Sanon as the verbal commits or the fully committed transfer portal players, I think this just really gives St. John's an opportunity to play with pace, or at the very least, a change of pace. And again, that was not to criticize their performance last year, but again, right, they played within within kind of their own limitations, which is fine. I just like this. I think this allows them to be a lot more creative in what they do, and likewise on both ends. They can grind in the half court. They can actually play up tempo, and then, as you said, when you have between, I'm with you, Sanon, Hopkins, not the greatest. I wouldn't call them elite 3-point shooters, but just those two guys, amazing. I think there's a little bit more on-ball shot-making ability that those two guys bring in, especially Sanon. And then ideally, if you can bring in Xaivian Lee and or Ian Jackson, wow. You have a lot more dynamic play, even in the half court. These are not just transition merchants.
So I already lost my train of thought, but it's fine. Just on Sanon, I know we talked about him a little bit. I mean, what do you think of him as an NBA draft prospect? I had him as a borderline first-round pick if he were to declare. I wasn't anticipating he declared, but if he had, that's why I think, late first, early second-round pick. Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about him as a prospect?
I mean, earlier in the season, I'd say like around December, I had him as high as like top 20. Mm-hmm. I think like maybe like late teens. Again, like I value players that can attack a set zone D. When you can do that and actually like create open looks for yourself or others, especially when you do it with a somewhat iffy 3-point shot, then that means, right, that your handle, your ability to play, manipulate cadence, you're doing a lot of the right things. That means you're probably a more fundamentally sound player. And for him, I mean, I don't know if I'd call him like, uber athletic, but he is athletic. He's got a lot of pop. He's got a lot of wiggle to his game. And I like that. I feel like his shooting mechanics were good enough that like over time, it gives you reason to believe that they'll improve over time. Catch and shoot numbers were at least somewhat around like, conference average. So, I mean, I think going into next season, he should still be like in first round discussions to how high, as with regards to how high he can go. I mean, obviously that's to be determined. That 3-point shot could go a long way in making him either, like, as you said, a late first rounder or like a surefire lottery pick. Because I think at one point, a lot of people were saying, man, this kid does have that kind of upside, so.
And I think the other thing that we need to factor in when talking about just the St. John's team in general is obviously the elephant in the room, rather, would be Bryce Hopkins' health. He played 14 games 2 years ago before tearing his ACL. Now, this year, he only played in 3 games. So that's obviously going to be a big determining factor on how good the St. John's team is, because we don't know how much Bryce Hopkins is going to play. I mean, Rick Pitino clearly felt strongly enough to, for lack of a better term, kick RJ Lewis, who just won Big East Player of the Year, to the curb in order to bring in Bryce Hopkins. So he must feel pretty confident about his health. But, I mean, right now, I tweeted out a couple days ago, my way too early, obviously, we're talking about April 10th here, my way too early top 25. Based off what's happened, obviously, this is very fluid. It's going to change quite a bit based off where guys go, who transfers, etc. I just want to give that caveat. I have St. John's 6th right now in the country. Just based off basically the 3 guys they have. Zuby, Bryce Hopkins, and Sanon. I think it might be just about the best right now, based off if you look at every roster, the best big 3 assembled in college basketball. Again, that's assuming Hopkins' health. And again, if they get one of Ian Jackson or Xaivian Lee, they have to be, top 4?
I would think so.
I'm just imagining that team where they would be in a preseason ranking.
I mean, because again, it's not simply just how, adding in these individually talented players, but obviously like what kind of effect does it have on each other or the rest of the team. I really think that Sanon, since we can bank on him, I'm knock on wood, that we are going to bank on him being healthy, right? Just adding in Joson Sanon, I feel like it'll really maximize Zuby, I think there's a lot more opportunity for him to be involved in like, some more like high screen action, or like some kind of empty corner side pick and rolls, especially if you have now a healthy Bryce Hopkins. I mean, you can get away with that, right? You can really start moving the defense, and overloading them onto one wing. So yeah, I mean, I think there's just so much more that they can do. And I'm not sure what Zuby's ceiling is, because I know, like, internally within the Center Hub, we've had these conversations about, well, how would we rank him, as a potential draft prospect? I'm not sure, but I feel like we may get to see the best version of him, with these guys. And then, as you said, if you're pairing him with like, a pick and roll maestro like Xaivian Lee, or an offensive like kind of firecracker in Ian Jackson. I mean, there's just so much. There's now so much you can do, and I think it offers like the positional versatility we believe Zuby offers. I think like we'll actually see that like more consistently.
Yeah. For what it's worth, like whether Zuby ends up being an NBA draft prospect or not is obviously to be seen. But in terms of like college basketball, we know he's like a hell of a college player. Like he's going to
absolutely.
He's going to be an All-American next year, I would imagine, or at least
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Julian and I, when we went up to Rutgers for the preseason game for Rutgers and St. John's, we said, oh, well, Rutgers' biggest issue last year, we went to obviously see Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, and the guy we came away most impressed with was Zuby. Because at the time, nobody knew. He didn't play last year. We said, oh, Rutgers' issue was rebounding last year. They're going to be able to rebound against the St. John's team because they have no big men. Then out of nowhere, Zuby started that game and just dominated. Again, it was a scrimmage, it was a preseason game, but that was like the game that we said, holy crap, like this guy is a player. And he lived up to the hype in the regular season for what it's worth.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, right? Like when I say that he has like a high motor, make no mistake, that's not to say that he isn't skilled. But again, right? Like now that motor can actually be channeled, right, in more structure, if that makes any sense, you know, as opposed to just kind of like picking, like, you know, being opportunistic, picking his spots. I mean, like, there's now like a little bit more, he'll kind of have an idea of all the different ways he can attack at any given set or at any given moment. I think, yeah, that, as you said, what, top 6, top 5? Yeah, I think it'll be warranted or well earned.
Absolutely. Definitely the favorites in the Big East. I mean, Creighton, obviously, they got Owen Freeman and Josh Dix. UConn's always going to be competitive. Villanova is hopefully going to get back on track. But either way, St. John's clear favorite to me, at least definitely right now and most likely going into next year in the Big East. Okay. I think that's all we have for St. John's, Bryce Hopkins, you know, all those guys incoming. So you can follow me on Twitter at @the_NBAGel. That's NBAGELL. You can follow Conrad on Twitter at CP3_777. Go check out our work at the-center-hub.com. Definitely, Conrad's always a great time to follow him, but definitely with the WNBA draft coming up on Monday, is it, Conrad?
On Monday, I know. Monday. Yeah.
So he is obviously a great basketball mind in general, but definitely, especially with women's basketball. I don't want to say it's your forte because, again, you're a jack of all trades, but either way,
yep.
There you go. And I'm not going to say master of none because he's definitely a master of multiple things as well.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we will talk to you guys soon, and thanks for listening.